I wondered if anybody on the panel had a particular bias in favor of the extended advance directive or just naming a power of attorney. I know when I was in Maryland, the University of Maryland did an ethical study, or the ethics department did a study where they had people complete advanced directives, and then they asked them hypothetical questions, and there was a huge disconnect between the result from their advanced directive and the other. And when I got an entire nursing staff at a hospital to work on advanced directives, I was encouraging them to at least entertain the idea of finding someone that you could have a conversation with and simply trust them to do the right thing, understanding what your wishes were, and that would be preferable. What's your thoughts?
It's so variable. In Tennessee, we have two forms. One is just the basic, here's who speaks for me form, which when people ask me, well, what would you do? I say, well, at a minimum, you should do that, because it's so important to have an advocate and someone that can help speak for you. But the longer form, the Advanced Care Plan, offers you 4 scenarios to consider and think about, if this were true for me and this was permanently how I was going to be, what would I want? So at least it begins to help you to think about what might happen. It's a great conversation starter. And then based on those designations, you then pick through, so if I was permanently comatose, never ever going to wake up, what kinds of advanced treatments would I want? Resuscitation, life support, going to the operating room, artificial feedings, IV fluids, etc. So I find that those forms are more helpful, as you indicated from the study, because it gives you a better idea about exactly what it is that we're talking about in terms of what are the scenarios that might cause someone to say, would she want this? Is this consistent with his values? And what exactly are you talking about in terms of advanced care? So I think those forms are really helpful, but I must confess a bias to, I just want you to fill one out. So, if you are more comfortable with just the here's who makes decisions for me, then we'll have an extended conversation about here's what you need to think about as you talk to your decision maker here, and I'm going to give you the whole form because here's this other one with all these scenarios, and you guys can kind of use that as conversation to help you think about what are the kinds of decisions I have to make. But I agree with you, the scenario-based forms are very helpful. There's several out there, and since Tennessee honors forms from all over the place, there are some that are very narrative in origin, where you have to think about what are my thoughts and feelings about kidney dialysis? What are my thoughts and feelings about breathing machines? The more narrative ones, they take a long time to fill out, which is why we don't fill them out in the hospital, because we just don't have the time. But the Advanced Care Plan in Tennessee is helpful because of that scenario-based kind of thinking that it prompts.
The first thing to do is tell somebody what you want. Unbelievably important. An advance directive can be nothing more than a conversation. The papers are all very useful if there's nobody else around who normally speaks for you, but probably the single most important thing you can do is tell someone, I want you to be the one, and this is how I'd like you to handle it. Because that is an advanced directive. There are lots of other pieces of paper. By the way, for people who are worried about what that might mean, none of those hold a shred of water unless you can't speak for yourself. And I think that's one of the things that causes people to be afraid of these. Oh my gosh, I just gave my son-in-law the ability to run my life, But none of it goes into force unless you cannot speak for yourself. And none of these, by the way, permits a family member to say, I know what he said when he was alive, but I'm in charge now and we're going to do it my way. We run into that pretty frequently, but that's not what the power of attorney gets them. It gets them the ability to stand up for what the patient has already said he or she wants. And that's where that sits.
Now, all the lawyers in the room would tell you, yes, a verbal directive is enforceable, but it's so much better to write it down.
Well, just one more gloss on this. There's the conversation, then there's the documentation. We do run into situations in which there is documentation, but no conversation has been had. Yeah. People who didn't know that they had been named as the surrogate decision maker, and when they find that out, are at a loss to try to understand what this patient might have wanted. So if you can only have one, have the conversation.
Absolutely.